Hello, once more, and welcome back to the channel back on YouTube. Doing my Week 4 2023 Big Ten football predictions after going 11-2 last week. My record improved to 33-5 through the first 3 weeks of the season. Week 4 coming up this week. We have 9 games, all 14 teams in action, multiple non-conference matchups, and multiple conference matchups going into this weekend in week number 4 of the Big Ten predictions as we get into it starting tomorrow night. With the Friday night slate, as again for fourth week in a row, we have a Friday night game in the Big Ten. I guess that's the Big Ten's a new thing here in 2023 and the future. So let's get into it. Big Ten predictions starting right now. As I get this straightened out, there we go. Wisconsin, Purdue is our first matchup of the night. Starting tomorrow night on Friday as we get into it. This matchup coming in, Wisconsin comes in 2-1 in this matchup in West Lafayette, and Purdue traveling on the road trip as they take on Purdue, who comes in at 1-2. And yeah, Purdue coming in at 1-2, they have to bounce back a bit, and they have to get wins. And for Wisconsin, though, their only loss to Washington State this year was a game they lost on the road, which I predicted Wisconsin would win. Back in week 2, Wisconsin lost 31-22, so that was their closest game. So, looking at this matchup coming into the weekend, it's been interesting to see tomorrow night who's going to win this matchup. I think Wisconsin's going to win the matchup on the road at Purdue to go to 3-1, and I think Purdue's going to lose this one, and we're going to start 1-3 on the year, fall back in the Big Ten West race. I think Wisconsin gets a win and improves to 3-1 on the year on the road on Friday night under the lights in West Lafayette on the road at Purdue tomorrow night to start us off. Moving on to our Saturday slate of games. Yep, our Saturday slate. Multiple games on Saturday afternoon and Saturday evening. The first one starting on the road in Ann Arbor, Michigan. The Michigan Wolverines come in at 3-0, and the Rutgers Scarlet Knights coming in as well. Rutgers comes into this matchup in the Big Ten this year in a surprising spot as Rutgers comes into week number 3. Michigan comes in 3-0. Rutgers comes in having a 2-1 record. No, 3-0 actually. Wow. Okay, Rutgers comes into this matchup surprisingly 3-0 as well after beating Virginia Tech last week. So this is a matchup of unbeatens. And Rutgers, they've had experience in the last decade since Jim Harbaugh has been head coach at Michigan, where Rutgers has actually gone to Michigan and won in Ann Arbor since joining the Big Ten at least once. That's happened. Unfortunately, I think Michigan is the team to beat this year in the Big Ten. They've won the last 2 Big Ten titles, made the college football playoff 2 years in a row, and lost in the college football playoff. I think Michigan's going to start with a win this week and start 4-0. I think this is going to be Rutgers' first big test, and unfortunately, Rutgers is going to take that loss, I think, this week, going into as they go into week 5 next week. I think Rutgers takes their first loss of the year on the road at Michigan, surprisingly. So yeah, I'm taking Michigan to go 4-0, start hot this year on the season. Which moves on to our next game. Our first of non-conference matchups coming up in week number 4. Florida Atlantic, which will be represented by the Big Ten helmet. And going into Illinois, Champaign. Illinois coming in as a team that is playing good football. Illinois coming in at 2-1. They lost on the road to Kansas back in week number 2. Going into this matchup, they won last week. Illinois lost last week to Penn State, so they're coming in at 1-2, unfortunately. And they're going to have to win this matchup if they want to play in the Big Ten race. They're currently at the bottom of the Big Ten. Only 2 Big Ten West teams are unbeaten. That's Iowa and Minnesota, which we'll talk about those 2 teams later. But I think Illinois gets a rebound win this week after losing 30-13 and also losing 30-13 last week, and then losing the week before on the road at Kansas 34-23. I think Illinois will rebound this week, get their second win of the year, try to even it up, and get to 500, which I think Illinois will do this week with a win at home. coming up after that. Our next non-conference matchup, sticking around at the Big Ten West, we go out west to Lincoln, Nebraska, where Louisiana Tech comes in to play the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Nebraska coming in off their first win last week as they beat NIU 35-11. Coming into this matchup, they're looking to go to 2-2 on the year. I think Nebraska will do that under Matt Rule, get his second win after starting 0-2. They lost on the road at Minnesota and lost at Colorado the first two games. I think coming in, I think Nebraska will even up the record at 2-2, getting a win at home for a second straight week under head coach Matt Rule in his first year in the Big Ten. So that's what I have going on there in that matchup for this week. As Nebraska will go 2-2, and they're going to I think they're going to score at least 30 points again against the non-conference opponents. So Nebraska gets their second win of the year, I believe, going into it on Saturday afternoon. Moving on to our next matchup. We're going to stay in the Big Ten. Let's go to conference matchup. This time around in the Big Ten East. In the Big Ten East, as Maryland and Talia Tagovailoa, their quarterback, goes in, going into Michigan State, who earlier this week announced the firing of their head coach due to the sexual harassment allegations. Michigan State's first suspended their coach last week, and then they had their assistant coach the team, and they lost 41-7 against Washington, which I picked Michigan State surprisingly to get a win, but you can't be right every game of the year. So here's the deal. I think Maryland coming in, they're 3-0. And this year, Maryland in the Big Ten and their 3-0 start. 42-14 last week against Virginia. The week before that, they scored. Can you find it? Where is it? Okay. And the week before that, they gave up 30. They scored 38-21, 38-20 against Charlotte. Week 2, won in week 1. They won against Towson 38-6. So their average margin of points, as you can see, is above 35. Is above 38 points a game. So last week scoring 42 against Virginia, their highest point total, of scoring 38 the first 2 weeks. They're going in against Michigan State, who scored 7 last week and then won the first 2 weeks. As you look at it, Michigan State going in 45-14 against Richmond in the week before that. Michigan State won 31-7 against Central Michigan. So unfortunately, I think Maryland's going to break Michigan State down and get their second one of the year and go 4-0. So Maryland's going to become the second Big Ten team, the Big Ten East, to go 4-0 on the year, I think, this week with a win at Michigan State, surprisingly. They get the win there. So taking Maryland for the win on Saturday to go 4-0. Put themselves in the driver's seat with Michigan, surprisingly. We still have two other Big Ten East teams that are 3-0 looking to go 4-0 this week, which we'll talk about here in a few minutes. But taking Maryland this week against Michigan State. Moving on to our next matchup in the Big Ten East. As we have the 1-2 Indiana Hoosiers hosting a MAC opponent in Akron. Indiana coming in with 2 losses on the year, lost to Ohio State, and they won, and also 1 win, and also lost to Louisville last week, 21-14 on the neutral site game in Indianapolis. I predicted Louisville could win, and then back in week 2, Indiana won 41-7 against Indiana State. So this week, Indiana's taking out Akron in the first of 4 Big Ten night games this week. Big Ten East, Indiana gets Akron. So this is a matchup, I think, if you look at it, against a MAC opponent. Earlier this year, Illinois played Illinois played a MAC team and barely won in week 1. Yeah, Illinois played Toledo, beat Toledo 30-28 back in week 1. I'm going to say the same thing about Akron and Indiana. Say that Indiana's going to be one of those teams against a MAC where it's going to be a close game throughout the game, I think. Unfortunately for Indiana, again, but against a MAC team, I think Indiana's going to win by 1 score at least against Akron under the lights at home on Saturday night. And that's how Indiana's going to get it done on Saturday with a win in week number 4 as they improved to 2-2 on the year. Moves on to our night games. Our second night game of the night. We have to go to the Whiteout in Penn State as they host the Iowa Hawkeyes, my favorite team. I'm a Big Ten fan, as a fan of Iowa football. I'm watching all their games on TV and, seeing them the last 3 weeks. Last week, their best performance of the year as they scored 41 against Western Michigan, surprisingly, after scoring only 20 and 23 the first 2 weeks combined. Last week, scoring 41. Iowa's going to have a tough game on their hands. I saw the projected Penn State was projected earlier this week by 14. But unfortunately, I'll say this. In the last 10 years, or last decade and a half, 20 years at least, when these two teams meet up, have had close games. There have been times where it's been 9-3, 6-3 one time. And then there's been other games where they each score about 17, just over 14, and just over 14, barely get to 20 in both. And it's a 3-point win for one team or a 6-point win for one of them. I think they're going to see something like that again this week, even though it was projected Penn State to have won by 14. I think you're going to see a game this week where both teams score points. It's going to be a low scoring, I think. But I do think Penn State wins at home with the Whiteout at home this week. Not by one score at least. I don't know what that one score is going to be. But it's going to be a one-score game, I think. Not 14 like it's projected to be, like I saw already this week. Unfortunately, I don't give you projections on who to pick and how to score the games. But I'm taking Penn State against Iowa. Unfortunately, as an Iowa fan, I have to do it. You can't pick your favorite teams all the time, and I know that. That's why I'm picking Penn State to win by at least one score in this matchup, which I think will happen because they've done it in the past. Last time these two teams played, back in 2021, Iowa won by one score, and that happens in this matchup. And it's turning into a matchup that's become a rivalry over the years, where both teams come in and have good years. One of these teams has good years, one of them has a bad year, or both of them have good years, and they do pretty well for each other. They do pretty well, and they still end up winning by one score. But I'm taking Penn State in the matchup under the lights. That game's on CBS, by the way, or Paramount Plus if you want to watch it. Taking Penn State into that one. As we move on to our next game under the lights, our next Big Ten night game, surprisingly, will be a Big Ten matchup. Northwestern Wildcats hosting one in Evanston against the Minnesota Golden Gophers. Minnesota, just like Iowa's the other Big Ten West team that's 3-0 coming in, has a chance to win their 4th game of the year. Minnesota, by the way, Minnesota lost. Minnesota's 2-1 actually. Minnesota actually comes in at 2-1. Northwestern comes in at 1-2 in this matchup. Minnesota, I think, going on the road to Northwestern fans, I'm sorry, like I said in the preseason predictions, with interim head coach coaching your team and having finished 1-11 last year, unfortunately, I think Northwestern, again, this year is going to win only one game. Maybe 2. Or maybe they lose 11 in a row. But I like Minnesota's matchup. They have a plenty good players. They have a good defense back who's from the Chicago area, from one of the high schools local. Tyler Newman, number 27 defensive back for Minnesota. There was a pick 6 earlier this year. Interceptions against Nebraska. Projected to be a first-round pick this year in the 2024 draft. Minnesota has pretty good players. They're going to get some good game against Northwestern this week. I think Minnesota's going to have a pretty good matchup. They're going to probably score about 35, maybe 40 against Northwestern, unfortunately. So, taking Minnesota on the road this week for the matchup on a Saturday night to go 3-1. Moving on to our last game of the night. This one, we have to go to South Bend, Indiana, a non-conference road game for the Ohio State Buckeyes as they go into Notre Dame. Under the lights, Notre Dame and Ohio State matchup, which is going to be a top 10 matchup. Ohio State comes in number 6, 3-0 on the year. Notre Dame also comes in with an unbeaten record. Truth is, I'm going to take the higher ranked team, Ohio State, on the road in South Bend. Surprisingly, I know Notre Dame fans probably thinking, "Oh, why not take Notre Dame this week?" Well, Notre Dame's ranked 9th. Ohio State, I think they're playing much better lately. Last week, Ohio State won. Where was it? Okay, there it is. Won 63-10 against Western Kentucky. In the previous 2 weeks, they scored, 35-7 against Youngstown State. In week 1, they scored 23 and only gave up 3. So it's been another one of those weeks. I think Ohio State's going to get a win, but this one's going to be much closer than I think. This one's going to be at least a one-score game. Both teams probably scoring at least 21, maybe 28 this week in the matchup. It's gonna be a one-score game at least. I think Ohio State though goes on the road to Notre Dame and gets the win on Saturday night. That game's on NBC and Peacock in Notre Dame, at Notre Dame in South Bend, or if you want to watch it. That is it for the week number 4 Big Ten predictions. As I go through the week, as I give you my recap real quick. First of all, taking Wisconsin at Purdue Friday night. After that, I'm taking Michigan in the matchup of unbeatens as they beat Rutgers. After that, I'm taking Illinois against non-conference opponent in Florida Atlantic. From there, I'm taking Nebraska against non-conference opponent in Louisiana Tech. From there, I'm taking another unbeaten Big Ten East team to get a win in Maryland as they beat Michigan State. After that, I'm taking Indiana over Akron in a close game for a Big Ten MAC opponent. Just because Illinois was a close game against Toledo, I think Akron's going to be the same against Indiana, unfortunately. In Penn State, taking another unbeaten team in the Penn State Nittany Lions to go 4-0 in the whiteout against Iowa by 1 score. In Northwestern in Evanston, Illinois, I'm taking the Minnesota Golden Gophers to get their 3rd win of the year on the road at Northwestern. And Saturday night in South Bend, the game of the week, Ohio State and Notre Dame, top 10 match. I'm taking number 6 Ohio State over number 9 Notre Dame in a close game on Saturday night. If you enjoyed today's video, please comment below who your favorite team in the Big Ten is playing and if you think they're going to win. And also, please remember to watch, like, subscribe. Don't forget to tell your friends to do the same if not done so yet already. And also, don't forget to hit that notification button below so you know when there's new videos on the channel. With that being said, have a nice day, stay safe, and peace out. And I will see you right back here coming up next Thursday with our Week 5 predictions. Hope you all enjoyed it. Stay tuned, stay safe, and peace out. And I'll see you next Thursday, everyone. Bye for now. Stay safe out there.